Starting the December 6, 2018 Planning Commission meeting, Mr. Kane, will you take roll?
Daly?
Here.
Friedrich? Here. Honig?
Here.
Horgan?
Here.
Irwin?
Here.
Kostreva?
Here.
Leash? Ortman?
Here.
Rise?
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes.
Move to approve the minutes?
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the Zoning Board of Appeals report. Commissioner Friedrich?
Madam Chair, we reheard a case from the previous month due to a procedural error. However, the outcome of the meeting was the same. Variance was denied.
Thank you. And next item on the agenda is communications.
Madam Chair, you have no communications tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. And then the next item on the agenda is SUP 1815. Mr. Kane?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our first and only public hearing this evening is a special use permit request for a short-term rental in the CD3 zoning district. The property in question is located at 1017 South Arnold Street. This is in an area that has a future land use of urban residential. The current use of the property is as a single-family dwelling. The property in question is located on South Arnold Street, just north of Bellows Street. You'll see this is an area of zoning transition in the community. The properties immediately to the east are zoned CD4, which is a mixed-use district. The current land uses there are commercial in nature to shopping centers. Immediately to the south is another property that's zoned urban residential. As you get to Bellows Street, you'll recall on the zoning map we have several properties that are also zoned CD4 that front along Bellows Street. Immediately to the west and north of this property, the other properties share the same zoning and future land use district as the subject property, CD3 urban residential with a future land use of urban residential. This is a view of the property looking from South Arnold Street toward the east. You've probably noticed one of the unique peculiarities about Mount Pleasant. There's several homes in the central neighborhoods that are, for whatever reason, were built at the rear of the lot. This is one of a handful on this particular block of South Arnold Street that were constructed in that manner, and there's several others located throughout the older parts of the community. So the home in question is the home that's located here at the back of the lot. We'll get a slightly better perspective on the dwelling itself from this image. This is taken from the alleyway. This would be looking to the south and west towards Central Michigan University. Immediately to the rear of the perspective would be the back of the shopping center that includes the AutoZone auto parts store. This would be looking again towards down the alleyway towards John's Drive-In. Short-term rentals are subject to a special use permit in the CD3 zoning district. There are several special use criteria which a short-term rental must meet in order to be eligible to receive that special use permit. You'll see from staff's report in the packet that the subject property meets all the special use permit criteria for a short-term rental. As with the prior short-term rental requests, I've indicated that for criteria number 1, that really is a subjective matter that's subject to the Planning Commission's determination. So with that, I would welcome questions. We do have the property owner, Mr. Olson, in the audience who's here to answer your questions as well. Staff's recommendation is that the special use permit be approved subject to the conditions of public safety. That condition in this case would be to obtain a housing license from the fire department consistent with other rental properties in the community. Madam Chair, I'd welcome your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Any questions for Mr. Kane?
Can you confirm to me, Mr. Kane, again, the restrictions on the property physically are no different than those that rent their home under a rental license. Is that right? Are they're subject to the exact same window modifications and all the other things that the rest of us that own full year rentals?
Yes, sir, that's correct. So a short-term rental is treated the same as any other rental from the housing licensing perspective. And so when the applicant goes through that process, they'll go through the same inspection process, the same codes will be applied. The same type of license will actually be issued, so in this case, it would be a single-family license because of the district the property is located in, and it'll be held to the same annual renewal schedule that a single-family rental that's used on a more typical basis as a year-long lease type arrangement would be. And to the same extent, if the property owner at some point chose to discontinue the short-term rental use, they could do that and just abandon the SUP and continue the rental license as a long-term rental.
And they're subject to the very same fee that we that own rentals. There's no change in the fee, the fact that it's short-term rental.
That's correct. The fire department housing licensing fees are based on the type of dwelling unit that's being rented, so the single-family fees would be the same regardless of whether it's a short-term rental or not.
So get the short-term rental license, and you said if they abandon the short-term rental license, they could still rent the house as a house rental, just like anybody could rent a house as a house rental.
That's correct. Yeah, the special use permit could be obtained. They could put this on a listing site, rent it for a week, and if that week-long rental decided they loved the place and wanted it for the year and they could come to terms, they could rent it for a year without any permission from the planning commission.
They could do that anyway.
Correct.
What goes into this inspection? What?
That's a good question. So the fire department's going to go in and the housing licensing code is primarily geared towards the safety of the structure as it relates to the occupants. And so some of the typical things that will be identified in a housing licensing inspection that might differ from the way your personal private home, an owner-occupied home, is built or maintained. They're going to be looking at ensuring that all of the property is weather tight. So that would be no rotting wood on the siding, that your windows and doors are sealed appropriately. They do look at the health and safety interior. So if you were missing a receptacle cover for your, in your electric service, if there were any like code violations with your plumbing or electrical, they're going to be looking at things like that. Some of the big things that are like the, I guess, more serious differentials would be in terms of smoke alarms. They're going to make sure that those are hardwired together. So if one goes off, they all go off. And they're going to look at egress from the structure. So to Commissioner Kostreva's question, one of the common things that people have to address is having the appropriate opening in your windows. And as I understand it, is as much to get the occupants out as it is to allow the firefighter to obtain entry into the structure. And so they're going to be looking for a certain amount of clear open space in the window. So one thing you might notice, and you can take a look after tonight's meeting if you have seen any properties where they've maybe made a conversion of windows from a double hung to a casement type window, that's a common way of remedying an insufficient opening in a window without having to make structural modifications to the property. And so sometimes that can be a telltale sign if you're going, that's an unusual place for a casement window. It may have been done in order to obtain a housing license.
Yeah, yes, a casement will provide an opening if it's the right kind of casement, whereas it's a little harder to get both sashes up and out through the screen because there's a storm window attached to the thing. You just have to bust it out. I wouldn't call that an egress, really.
Right, well, they're really just looking at the, dimensionally, they have to have a certain amount of width, a certain amount of height, and a certain amount of area in order to qualify as a sufficient means of egress. So that's admittedly layman's. I don't do housing inspections, so I think the high points. I saw a couple of income property owners in the dais nodding, so I hope I covered it more or less accurately. I will say also, and I don't know if this was kind of implied in your question, like the building code, the housing licensing code is about meeting a minimum standard. So it's not necessarily producing a Cadillac version of something. It's going to produce the Kia. I say that as a former Kia owner, so no judgment on anybody that owns a Kia. Great car, it's very durable, but it's not giving you like a flashy end product. It's giving you the basic, safe end product.
Thank you.
Function.
Right, yeah, it's going to be focused on function more than form.
Any other questions for Mr. Kane?
Is this comparable to the one, and I can't remember the name of the street, but the one that's on the west side of town, west side of the university, off of, I can't think of the street.
The Sunset Lane?
Yes. in that no one's in there all the time.
Yeah, so that's a good distinction to draw. So, yeah, we've had, this is the 5th short-term rental special use permit to come before the Planning Commission this year. And in all but one of those cases, it was a owner-occupied property. As I have indicated previously, whether or not the property is owner-occupied, the property owner could periodically lease out the entire home to another family and leave. They, of course, if they have a homestead exemption on their taxes, they're going to need to occupy the home sufficiently to still qualify for that. But the special use permit is not, by definition, limiting their use to one condition or the other. If they do choose to be an owner-occupant, that does limit the number of people that can stay in the home while they're present.
Oh, okay.
And the number of people that can stay when they're not present is also limited because of the zoning district. But there's not implicitly in the special use permit criteria a distinction between those two conditions.
Limited to what specifically?
So if you, if there's a family occupying the home, you could have one additional person present through a short-term rental scenario. If the family's not present, then you could have another family, another group of people that meet the definition of family under the code occupy the structure in a rental scenario. But you couldn't have, for instance, 4 unrelated friends rent the home as a short-term rental in this district.
Is that in our code, or is that in the housing rental license code?
That's in our code. So this is a district that only allows single-family occupancies within units, and so there wouldn't. There's only one. There's one overlay on our zoning map that allows for a rooming type occupancy, and that would actually require a second special use permit in order to have a higher level of occupancy. This particular property is not eligible for that type of license.
So a single-family house is still a single-family house,
Correct.
give or take.
In the housing license that would be issued. So I guess to be more precise to Commissioner Rice's question, the zoning would limit it, but the housing license itself is limited by the zoning as well. So when the housing license is applied for, that comes to the planning office and we confirm that the type of license is one that's eligible. And so I wouldn't sign off on the housing license application for more than a single family license at this location because that's all the maximum possible. So it'll be regulated by both, but it kind of all comes back to the zoning ordinance.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If the applicant would like to come up.
My name's Tom Olson. I purchased this property about a year ago. My son was going to school here, and that was the main reason for the purchase. He's done with school here, and instead of selling it, my wife and I decided to possibly Airbnb it. I don't know if you're familiar with Airbnb, but I've used Airbnb around the country. Several times I've used Airbnb in a university district. And one thing I noticed about Airbnb is the places are clean, they're well kept, and it keeps the riffraff out, which is very nice because they rate all their customers. And so our plan is we didn't want to rent it to college kids because that's not the avenue we really want to take. So more so, we're going to be setting this property up for professional travelers, possibly using the university, or families. And we won't even rent it for 1 or 2 days. It'll be a 3-day minimum, 3, 4, 5, or 7 day. So we're hoping that we can upgrade the property and make a go of it and increase the value of the property, actually.
Any questions for the applicant?
I think you would, none of our business, I just thought it was unusual that the property changed hands 3 times in 3 years, but that's not actually technically what it did.
It really didn't, and the title's going to be actually It just changed over, and it'll be changing one more time because we're gonna put it on a LLC of my wife and mine, but, so. And I actually bought the property from a friend, so.
When I drove by, the wood looked in pretty rough shape.
Yeah, the
Rotted
exterior,
wood trim and the
the
like.
exterior of the, home is not very good. It hasn't been painted in a few years, and I talked about that with the deputy, fire chief when he came by. My plan is in the spring to probably put vinyl siding on the home and re-roof the home, so it'll have a lot different appearance next year.
I mean, it's a different kind of issue. That's an asbestos siding, right?
Yeah, that's an old asbestos siding.
And what I've read is, I don't know how much you tie into the asbestos thing by taking it down and putting on vinyl. When I looked up that sort of stuff, that's really, I mean, yeah, if you're going to do it, you're going to do it. You're going to have to do it the right way. I mean, the siding doesn't look like it has a problem. It's old world.
Yeah.
You know, it's put up in 19.
There's not a lot of cracks in the siding or anything.
No, it looked in fine
It's in
shape.
great shape, it's
It's
old asbestos.
the thing that struck me was obviously the fence, because it's kind of being held up by new stuff that's been pegged in, and then the rotted woods, the trim. I don't know if you're thinking about doing something with the fascia, which probably hasn't been.
You talking about the wood fence?
Well, the wood fence, but now I'm talking just about the wood trim, the fascia, around the house.
Well, I'm replacing all the upper windows with e-casement windows. I just ordered those last week of what he talked about. They're gonna meet the standard upstairs. And, the downstairs windows are vinyl, but, the wood around them's all being replaced, so it's gonna be upgraded totally. We wanna make it nice.
Do you know the life of that roof, or if it's past its due date?
That roof is gonna have to be stripped off and, kind of straightened out with the joists.
I mean, it didn't look like it was curling, but it looked like,
Some of the joist is rolling a little bit, so it's gonna have to be straightened out, but
I think water's got in there.
no water.
Just old joists
Yeah.
creaking. You gonna keep that fence, or does the fence go, or?
I like the fence there to keep people from walking through. You know, I'm not real keen on that alley there, but it is there, so I like the fence because it keeps people from walking through.
I think the fence is fine,
I'm just gonna stain it. I got a sprayer, so.
thank you.
And the most number of unrelated people that you can rent to at any one time, unrelated, is
2.
2?
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And now I'm opening up public comment for this hearing, if anyone from the public would like to speak.
Good evening, Robert Banta, 1011 South Arnold. I'm supporting Mr. Olson in his venture. This is new to me too, learning how these work. Some tidbits of history. Herbert Bailey built those 4 houses on our block that sit back. Why he built them back? The only thing I can think, he wanted large front yards for the children to play in. That was a different method back then. That's why those 4 sit back, because he built all 4 of those, 2 on our side, and I live in 1 on the east side. The roof, I think, was put in 1985. I was there when the lady lived there. She put a new roof on. The blue shutters I put on myself for her because she wanted a little decoration and painted them. So that's all I have to say, and I'm willing to give Mr. Olson a chance to make use of his property in a profitable way for him.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'm opening up discussion, or if someone would like to make a motion.
Well, I think Mr. Olson, in good faith, is going to take care of the things, not the fence. I wish he'd take care of the fence, but I don't think we can say much about fences. You know, but there is wood trim that is rotting. But he's going to take care of the wood around the place and put a new roof, and I think that's kosher for me.
Anyone else have any comments or would like to make a motion?
I'll move. I move that the Planning Commission approve special use permit 1815, subject to the following conditions. The applicant shall comply with the requirements of the Division of Public Safety.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is public comment. If anyone in the public would like to comment, this is the last opportunity to do so. Seeing no one, I'm closing public comment, and next item on the agenda is staff report. Mr. Kane?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So first, I just wanted to let everybody know that we did have 3 planning commissioners that were up for reappointment this year, and all 3 planning commissioners up for reappointment were reappointed. So we'll be seeing the same 9 of you back here in January. We should have a fairly busy year coming up with our master plan process kicking off in the spring, and with medical marijuana applications beginning to float through our process probably in the spring as well. We've got a number of other cases that are sort of floating out there in the atmosphere before our deadline on Monday. I don't have a good sense of which, if any of those are going to actually land in our offices on Monday, but I would anticipate we'll likely see at least an application or 2 for that January meeting. And that's all I have tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Would anyone like to move to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Hearing adjourned.